The settlement on Viridian 7 had been silent for 3 solar cycles. When the rescue team finally arrived, Lynn expected to find ruins, perhaps bodies, maybe survivors huddled in emergency shelters. What she didn't expect was the forest itself to have changed. "Commander, you need to see this." Rao's voice crackled through the comm system, his usual stoic tone carrying an edge of something Lynn couldn't quite identify. Confusion, wonder? Lynn maneuvered her exosuit through the dense purple foliage, following the beacon signal to Rao's position. The Caltraxian officer stood at the edge of a massive tree. No, not a tree, a nest. The structure spiraled upward for at least 50 meters, woven from branches, bioluminescent vines, and what appeared to be pieces of the settlement's outer walls. "Report," Lynn commanded, though her eyes were already scanning the structure. "The colonists? They're alive. All 47 of them. But Commander," Rao paused, his scaled hand gesturing toward the nest's entrance. "You need to understand what happened here before we proceed." Inside the nest's lower chamber, Lynn found them. Cubs. Dozens of them. The indigenous species of Viridian 7, the ones xenobiologists had classified as non-sentient predators, were carefully, deliberately, protectively surrounding something at the chamber's center. A uniform. Standard issue Colonial Explorer Corps. The name tag was still visible, Torres. The cubs weren't attacking it. They were grooming it, the way young mammals groomed precious objects. One cub, no larger than a Terran dog, had curled itself around the jacket's sleeve, chittering softly. "Where's Torres?" Lynn asked, her heart hammering. "Alive. In the upper chambers with the other colonists." Rao's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Commander, the colonists say Torres saved them. All of them." The story came out in pieces, transmitted through the settlement's emergency logs and survivor testimonies. When the plasma storm hit 3 cycles ago, it hadn't just knocked out communications. It had triggered a territorial response in the forest's apex predators, creatures the size of ground vehicles, with claws that could shred plasteel. The colonists had 40 minutes before the beasts would reach them. Not enough time to evacuate, not enough time to build adequate defenses. Torres had been their head of security, former Earth Marine, decorated for service in the Outer Rim conflicts. She'd looked at the colonists, scientists, families, children, and made a choice. She'd walked out alone. The logs showed her biosigns moving away from the settlement, toward the approaching predator pack. The colonists watched in horror as she removed her uniform jacket, tied it to a branch, and stood her ground. Not with weapons, not with aggression. She'd begun to sing. Lynn played the audio file. It was a human lullaby, something ancient from Earth itself. Torres's voice carried through the alien forest, and impossibly, the predators stopped. They weren't attacking the settlement, one colonist explained in her testimony. They were protecting their cubs from the storm. The electromagnetic pulses were driving them mad, confusing them. Torres, somehow, she understood. For 3 cycles, Torres had stayed with the creatures. She'd helped them build the nest, using her knowledge of structural engineering. She'd shown them how to weave the bioluminescent vines to create barriers against the storm's radiation. She'd used her own body heat to warm cubs that had been separated from their parents. The uniform had been removed on the first night. Too rigid, too artificial. But the cubs had taken it, carried it to their sleeping chamber. Torres hadn't understood why until she saw them grooming it, arranging it carefully, protecting it the way they protected their own young. She'd become pack. "The storm ended this morning," Rao continued. "The adult creatures returned to their normal hunting grounds, but they left the cubs here with Torres. The colonists say she's been teaching them, teaching the cubs about humans, about cooperation." Lynn descended deeper into the nest, finally finding Torres in an upper chamber. The woman sat cross-legged, her bare arms covered in bioluminescent dust, surrounded by both human children and alien cubs. She was showing them all how to purify water using basic chemistry and the forest's natural resources. "Commander," Torres said, standing sharply, her military bearing returning despite her disheveled appearance. "Permission to report at ease, Torres." Lynn studied the woman before her. Torres had lost weight, her hair was matted with tree sap, and her eyes carried the exhaustion of 3 days without proper sleep. But there was something else there too. Pride. Purpose. "You saved them all." "No, ma'am." Torres gestured to the cubs, to the nest, to the impossible harmony around them. "We saved each other, The colonists had the knowledge. The creatures had the strength. I just translated. One of the cubs approached, chirping softly. It carried Torres's uniform jacket in its mouth, offering it up with what could only be described as reverence. Torres knelt, accepting it gently, and the cub nuzzled against her hand before scampering back to its siblings. "They think the uniform is me," Torres explained quietly. "When I had to go check on the colonists, they'd guard it. Keep it safe. It's like," she paused, her voice catching, "it's like they're guarding family." Lynn watched as a human toddler held hands with a cub, both of them watching Torres with identical expressions of trust. This wasn't in any first contact protocol. This wasn't supposed to be possible. But humanity had never been good at following supposed-to-bes. "The xenobiologists were wrong," Lynn said finally. "These creatures aren't non-sentient." "No, ma'am," Torres agreed. "They're just not sentient the way we expected. They communicate through care, through protection, through teaching their young. I just had to learn their language." Rao entered the chamber, his scaled face unreadable but his voice soft. "Commander, the cubs are becoming agitated. They want to know if—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "They want to know if we're taking Torres away." Lynn looked at Torres, then at the nest full of survivors, both human and alien. She thought about protocols, about regulations, about everything that said this situation should be impossible. Then she thought about what humanity did best: adapting, connecting, surviving against impossible odds. "Request permission to remain on Viridian 7 as the colony's liaison to the indigenous species," Torres said formally, though hope flickered in her tired eyes. Lynn smiled. "Permission granted, Torres. I think you've earned it." As Lynn and Rao departed, they watched Torres return to her work, the uniform jacket now draped over her shoulders, the cubs clustering around her feet. The human children followed her lead, learning to communicate across species, across evolution, across everything that said it couldn't be done. "Humans are strange," Rao observed. "Yes," Lynn agreed, watching Torres laugh as a cub climbed onto her back. "Strange, stubborn, and absolutely invaluable. That's why we're still here." In the nest behind them, cubs and children played together, guarding each other like precious treasure, just as they'd learned to guard that worn, precious uniform, a symbol not of war or authority, but of the human who'd chosen connection over conflict, who'd chosen to speak the language of care in a universe that too often spoke only violence, and in doing so had reminded everyone watching what it truly meant to be human.